Good morning, everybody. I'm Gianluca Carino. I'm the director of ICME, the Institute for Computational Mathematical Engineering, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all here at our XPO Research Symposium. It's a real pleasure to be here in person, to finally have a chance to connect, to discuss in person, to have actual interactions. We are expecting more guests to join us. So we'll get started. We have a packed agenda, so I don't want to start with too much delay. What I'm planning to do is to give you a very, very brief overview of XPO, highlighting some specific areas of the Institute and the research that we do, and then move quickly through the agenda and the discussion for today. So many of you are familiar already with ICME. Just to give you some sense of what the Institute is a graduate program. So we offer master's and PhD degrees in ICME. We have a cohort of about a little less than 200 students overall, master's and PhD. And our intention has really been from the beginning, when the program started almost 20 years ago, to really construct a program that would sit at the intersection of mathematics, statistics, computer science, and then disciplines in the engineering and also outside the engineering world, the sort of applied disciplines. And so that has been our mission, and certainly the intention has been to eliminate boundaries between this discipline and really create an educational environment, a research environment that is as broad as possible. To give you a more quantitative sense of how this breadth appears in terms of research topic and interest, these pie charts corresponds to the PhD students and their affiliations in the university, so where they are actually working on their research with their advisors, in what school. And on the right-hand side, these are the faculty that are affiliated with the program. And so as you can see, there is obviously a very large component from the School of Engineering, but a very, very healthy percentage of students working in different settings, both in the humanities, in the GSB, the Graduate School of Business, and so on and so forth. And we feel that this balance is really what makes ICME healthy and an attractive place to actually carry out research and sort of invest time and effort. From the point of view of the curriculum, we offer a number of courses and classes that are specifically ICME, that build our curriculum. And over the years, we have had a relatively steady stream of students going through the program, passing through both the master's and the PhD. In a sense, we sort of consider that to be our main sort of objective, to have a successful student in the program and also moving outside in the real world. And I don't have the details here, but our students tend to be evenly distributed among industry, academia, and research lab in terms of their sort of postgraduate careers. And so that's also very attractive from the point of view of sort of creating an environment of diversity in terms of interest and opportunity for them. We completed the admission for this year. We have a fantastic new cohort coming in, 54 new students that will join in the fall. Some of the statistics of our students are reported here, the incoming students. And this is just to give you a sense of, again, in terms of their interests. As you can see, both the PhD and the masters have a very broad set of interests and a sort of a very balanced distribution across most of the disciplines. The PhD, these are sort of their interests as they come in. Obviously, they might decide to work in different areas, but at least in terms of their initial interest, this is more or less the distribution. The other pie chart on the bottom here is a representation of the master's tracks we have in ICME. So the students are organized in different tracks, and as you can see, they're very, very evenly based this time. The other big news that I wanted to mention is that we have a new faculty joining in September, very, very soon. Madeleine Udell. Madeleine has been attracted to Stanford because she was actually a Stanford student and an ICME student. So she's going to be the first ICME student joining the faculty on campus. So this is a great accomplishment, really something we're looking forward to. And Madeleine will be joined with MSNE, Management Science and Engineering, and ICME. And I'm expecting a lot of contributions from her in the program. She will also give one of the talks today, so we can see a little bit more of her vision in a moment. From the point of view of the research, it's very, very difficult to sort of pinpoint what ICME does in terms of research or what are the focus area, because it's extremely, extremely broad. Goes all the way from application of computational methods in physical sciences, all the way to machine learning for autonomy and so on and so forth. Just to give you, again, maybe a very quick overview, I just decided to highlight few of our recent graduates. Allison is graduated last year, and her work was actually on building fairness within algorithms that we develop, in particular for assistance, verbal assistance, and trying to eliminate bias in the way we actually use, for example, Alexa and so on, these assistants. The other side of the slide is actually a very, very different application, is Daniel Wang, who graduated actually now 2 years ago, and he was working on modeling parachutes for Mars re-entry. And this is kind of duality. It's really interesting sort of thinking about students that spend a lot of time together, but then work on applications that are extremely different, obviously with the connecting focus of computational mathematics. I have two more examples. One comes from Amel, who is a PhD student in ICME, and the other is from Alex, who has been a long-time collaborators and involved in ICME and a faculty currently. And the interesting thing about these two different applications is that they both use data science and graph analytics to study completely different problems. On one end, networks of communities of friends and social communities. The other is to study through genomics the way certain islands in the Pacific Island have been sort of populated over the years, and what is the genomics of the population in those areas. So again, the idea is that we use computational mathematics in a way that that provides opportunities to actually explore very, very different questions from the research perspective. Just to give you a sense of a typical week in ICME, the current week we are in is not very typical, but just to give you a sense of how busy we are, we have 3 PhD defenses this week, one yesterday, one today, and one Thursday. You see the students that are defending, so good luck to them. Arun just finished yesterday, so he's off the hook. The others are moving forward with their defense in these days. And at the same time, on Thursday, we have the finals of the Explore projects. Explore is one of the classes we offer that is a project-based learning class. These are the projects that are represented. And so this is, again, showing you the sort of connection of many, many things that happen, in this case, in the exact same 4 days during this week. Very important for us is the industrial affiliate program. Is a way to expand our community to the outside world and to engage with faculty with industry and collaborators from different communities. There are a lot of ways in which we collaborate and connect to our industrial affiliates. Obviously, many of you are part of this community, and we are more than interested in expanding and extending the way we actually collaborate and interact with you. So if you're interested in discussion, obviously this is a great opportunity for us to finally discuss things together and perhaps coming up with new opportunities to engage. Just to finish, I just want to point out that we have a number of events coming up. The first is the AI in FinTech Forum coming up in less than a month at this point. And the other two, the summer workshop and the extend, are a little bit farther away, but these are important events for our program, for our community. If you're interested and if you want to know more, obviously reach out to me, reach out to Corinne or some of the others at registration. They can give you more details, but obviously you'll find everything on our website. To finish, this is the agenda for today. We'll start with the first session, which is going to be talks given by faculty at Stanford, talking about their research interests, and then we go into these 3 sessions. We want to make these as interactive as possible, so obviously ask questions as much as you can. We're going to have a panel at the end of each session to have a conversation. The only other thing I wanted to say is that we have a poster session afterwards, and please vote for the best poster. We want to make sure that our contributors are credited for their work, so we'll spend a little bit of time discussing the work with them. So I don't have anything else to say. I just want to ask you to participate any way you like, engage with the speakers, engage with us. If you have questions for me, obviously let me know as soon as possible. And please enjoy the conference. This is, again, very exciting for us to be finally all together. So thank you for coming. I'm going to get started with the first session. The first session is a faculty vision talk. So these are short talks given by, in this case, 3 faculty members at Stanford. So the first speaker is Daniela Saban. Daniela is in the Graduate School of Business. She's interested in operational research and algorithmic work related to economics, computer science, and operational research, as I said. She received her bachelor and master's in Argentina in computer science, and then a PhD at Columbia. And she has been at Stanford since 2015. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here. Over the years, I had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of faculty from ICME, also a lot of great students, so it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about this paper, which is joined with my co-authors, Ignacio and Fanyin. And the motivation for this is given by the assortment optimization problem, which is one of the canonical problems in operations management and operations research, which is how should we select a set of products to offer to maximize the revenue when consumers are going to make purchases according to their preferences. There's so much work in assortment optimization, mostly for retail, first in brick and mortar stores, more recently in online settings. And the question we had is, well, can the principles from assortment optimization for retail be applied in other settings? So what I'm going to talk very briefly today is about application-driven research that we did in partnership with a major US dating app. I'm not going to name the name of the dating app, but it's one of the major ones. So just so we are all on the same page, how online dating works. So my friend Winky wants to use online dating. The first thing they need to do is they need to create a profile. Profile is their name, the picture, what are their characteristics, so where do they live, their age, and so on, but also what are the preferences over others, what's the age range, how much they're willing to travel, and so on. So now they can start using the app. The way they will use the app is they'll open it, they'll see 3 profiles, and they need to decide whether they like or not like the profiles. And again, here they like Squinty, they didn't like the others. Now our friend Squinty uses the app as well. They see the profiles, and they need to decide whether they like or dislike them. And the next day, they both come back, they open the app, they also see new profiles, they make their like-dislike decisions, and because Squinty liked Winky, and Winky then liked Squinty, then a match is formed. So in a nutshell, each user sees an assortment of profiles and likes and dislikes them, and if users eventually see each other, a match is formed. And the question we had is, how do dating apps decide which profiles to show? So basically what we want to do is assortment optimization, not for retail, but for dating. So this is the roadmap of the collaboration. We first model it as an optimization problem. We use data and quasi-experiments to understand the way users behave in this platform. We design an algorithm to select these assortments, and we finally implement it in the field. So I have not a lot of time, so I'm going to basically show you one slide on each of these things. So this is the model. And the model, basically, I want you to think of online dating as an optimization problem. So basically, based on the information that our users put in their profiles, we can construct for each user the set of potential partners, which is people that we can potentially show to them. And we can also construct the backlogs, which are the set of users that like that user in the past, but the user has not yet seen. So this is important because that means that we are halfway through a match. Using these sets, we can construct the assortments to show. And then if a user logs in, they'll see the assortment we show them, and they make their evaluations. And based on this, the next day, we can update our set of potential partners. We can update our backlogs, construct the new assortments, and if users log in, they make their new evaluations. Okay, an important thing is that users do not leave after matching. If you have used a dating app in the past, you know that it may require many matches for you to get a date, so users do not leave immediately. Okay, so if we think of this as an optimization problem, your decisions should be, what is the daily assortment I'm going to be showing to each user? What we want is to maximize the number of matches throughout a time horizon. So this is a very important metric for the dating app industry. Then we have we have two types of constraints. The first one's what we call assortment constraints, which basically we have a limited number of profiles that we can show each day. Not all profiles are eligible to be shown. And we also have what I'm going to call business constraints, which are constraints that maybe the marketing team or other teams in the company impose so as to make the app more attractive. But we also have complicated constraints across time, so complicated dynamics. And the reason is that users are going to basically repeatedly interact with the platform, and they're mostly within the same geographical market. So we have constraints of the sort that profiles can be seen at most once throughout a time period, and so on. And we also have new information that comes every day because users log in and they make evaluations. Okay, so that's how we formulate the problem as an optimization problem. The next thing that we need to do is, if we want to optimize over this, we need to understand how users will make their like-dislike decisions, because eventually a match is formed after 2 likes. So we have all the data from our industry partner, and the way we model decisions is based on utility. So we look at the utility that I gets from being matched to J in period T, and if this is greater than our outside option, we are going to say that they like it, otherwise they won't like it. And of course, these utilities will clearly depend on the characteristics of I and J and their interactions, but we ask, what else can they depend on? So to cut to the chase, we say, does it depend on the recent experience that the user had in the platform? So for example, it might be that the number of matches you had in the recent past affect your like probabilities. And why do we care? Well, if this is true, it makes our algorithm a bit more complicated. Why? Because what we show them today affects basically who they like today, which in turn affects the matches they get today, which in turn affects the like probability tomorrow, which is something we would like to think of as parameters. And indeed, we find that the number of matches obtained in the recent past had a large, significant negative effect on like behavior. So if you have more matches, you become more picky. Okay, so then how do we incorporate these findings into the algorithm? I'm not going to describe the algorithm, but in a line, it's just going to be an LP heuristic with a 1-period look ahead. So what are the differences with current practice? Well, we use better personalized estimates for the like probabilities. We are also going to explicitly account for the probability that a profile is liked back. And we are also going to account for user activity and their recent experience in the platform. So what was the effect of past matches, but also frequency by which they log in. So with these 3 things, we ran a lot of simulations, and what we could see is that our improvements range from 25 to 45% in number of matches. And the reasons were, well, we were constructing better assortments. So basically, difference 1 and 2 together account for roughly 70 to 80% of the improvement. And accounting for activity and experience, so number 3 gave us the remaining 20 or 30% improvement. Okay, so based on these results, they were promising, so we convinced our industry partner to implement it in the field and run a field experiment with us. We used difference in difference design at the market level, so we are going to compare the 3 largest markets in Texas, Austin, Dallas, and Houston. We selected Houston randomly as for our treatment. So in August 2020, we ran our algorithm for a week in Houston, while the other cities had the default algorithm. And here you can see the number of matches as a function of the date. So in blue we have Houston. This is before the algorithm, and this is after we were running our algorithm, and you can see an increasing number of matches. If you formally measure these, what we found is that the number of matches increased by 27% in Houston. After this, we ran another field experiment, this time in Austin, and after that, we were able to launch it in a couple of more markets. Okay, so just to summarize, what are the lessons that we learned? First, that display optimization does play a big role in online matching platforms. It's not just used for retail. It does play a role in many other applications. Then the other thing that we learned is that you should try to model the impact of your algorithm on the future decisions of the users. So in our setting, using for just that effect that people will behave differently depending on the number of matches they had in the recent past led us for a 5% net improvement. And there are many interesting theory and algorithmic questions on how to manage dynamic decentralized matching markets. So that's it. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for being perfectly on time. There is time perhaps for a question, if there is a question from the audience.
You mentioned dynamic decentralized matching markets. You're looking at essentially decentralized computing like blockchain kind of behavior, or what kind of decentralized? Can you refer to decentralized aspect of what do you mean by that? Like blockchain kind of behavior or peer-to-peer scenario, or?
What I mean by decentralized is simply markets where you do not get to choose who matches with whom. You get to influence it some way, in this case by showing them something, but ultimately users will decide whether they want to match or not. So that's what I mean. So yeah, it might apply to many different applications.
Okay, well, great. Thank you again, Daniela. The next speaker is our very own Madeleine Dudel. Let me say a few words about Madeleine. I already said that she's going to be joining ICME very soon, at the end of the summer. She's currently at Cornell, and she's in the Operation Research and Information Engineering department there. Her appointment will be in MSNE in ICME when she arrives here. She received her PhD, as I mentioned, in ICME in 2015. And before that, she received her bachelor in physics from Yale University. Her research focuses on development of data science tools and optimization that exploit structure, and specifically low-rank structures, to sort of simplify and accelerate the process. She's interested in a number of applications in science, in finance, and in medicine. And as you can see, the focus of this particular talk is going to be on automating machine learning methodologies. And so unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us today. So she sent a presentation via video, but as I mentioned, she will be joining very soon. So we're looking forward for interacting with her in person very, very soon.
I'm Madeleine Udell. I'm an incoming professor in management science and engineering in ICME. I'm returning to Stanford from Cornell, where I spent 6 years as an assistant professor. And before that, I did my PhD in ICME. So it is absolutely a pleasure to be back, even if virtually, at XPO. Today, I'm going to tell you about how to automate machine learning. This is joint work with my graduating PhD student, Chengren Yang, who's actually moving to Google Brain this summer. So I don't need to tell you that there are so many machine learning problems. The machine learning has become more and more useful across so many domains of society. We use it for object detection. We use it for speech recognition. It's used for drug discovery. It's used in the social sciences. And in each of these domains, the data sets look very different. Every time you get a new data set, it has some new distribution. It has some new properties, new characteristics. And unfortunately, that means the best machine learning model for that data set is different. Okay, so you might think, okay, how do I deal with this? What's the best machine learning model for this data set? So maybe the first thing you try if you're a data scientist like I am is you fire up one of your favorite machine learning libraries like scikit-learn, and you say, well, why don't I just try a bunch of different classifiers? Maybe I'll try k-nearest neighbors with some choice of parameters, or a support vector classifier. Oh, there's lots of choices there. Gaussian process classifier, decision tree classifier. You go on and on and on. There are a lot of different kinds of classifiers, and trying them all, number one, takes a lot of time. Number two, runs the risk of overfitting to your data. It's not necessarily a good idea. Okay, but we know that the best machine learning model depends on the data set. This is a classic figure that you can find at the homepage of scikit-learn. And it shows you that depending on the data set that you have, different classifiers are going to perform better. So this linearly separable data set, right, with the blue on one side and the red on the other side, looks really good with a linear classifier, looks a little bit sillier with AdaBoost. Okay, whereas like this 2 moons data set is beautifully fit by an SVM. It's pretty well, not so well fit by this neural net, but certainly the linear model does horribly on this data set, right? And on any given data set, I mean, you might find some models work well, some models work poorly. Okay, so what do we do about this? We've got limited time, we've got limited compute budget, we've got a lot of different models. What's the right approach? First, let's think about what do we mean by the space of models, okay? So when me and my student have been thinking about it, we've been thinking about our choices as a pipeline, okay? A pipeline of machine learning primitives. So the input is the raw data set, and the first step maybe is to handle the missing entries. Okay, so we'll impute them in some way, maybe fill in the missing entries by the mean, but the median, the mode, or some fancier imputation method might also be reasonable. We're going to need to figure out how to encode non-numeric values. Maybe we'll encode categoricals with a one-hot encoder. Maybe there's something to do for text, something to do for images. We're going to deal with numeric values to make sure that they're not on crazily different scales that will throw off the classifier. So maybe we'll standardize them with zero mean and unit variance or something else, maybe a min-max rescaling. We might want to reduce the dimensionality to prevent overfitting. We could do that with PCA. We could do something simpler, like just throwing out the features that have zero variance. Lots of things we could do. And then finally, the estimators, which is what I showed you 2 slides ago, right? Lots of different choices of estimators. Here I'm using k-nearest neighbors with 5 clusters. Okay, so that's one example of a pipeline. There are lots of different pipelines. Okay, so Chengren and I asked this question on a whole bunch of data sets. So here we took 215 data sets that were not too big, not too small, from this benchmark OpenML. And we said, well, if we try all the pipelines, okay, we just ran code for a really, really, really long time. And we tried all the pipelines, okay, with all choices, hyperparameters, gridded out in some space. And we can tell you, based on this, the best pipeline on average, okay? So if you only get to fit one pipeline, right? You've got to use that pipeline. Here's the one that I recommend you use, okay? You should impute the missing entries by the mode, encode categoricals as integers, standardize every numeric feature to have zero mean and unit variance. You should remove features that have zero variance. And for your estimator, you should use gradient boosting with a learning rate of 0.25 and a maximum depth of 3. So that's great if you really only have time for one. On the other hand, the best estimator for each data set can be different, okay? So here we're just looking at estimators, okay? Just to sort of allow us to visualize. And the estimator that we chose here is the best estimator 38% of the time. But you can see there are lots of other estimators that are sometimes the best, okay? So what's an efficient way of figuring out which one? Okay, well, the solution is automated machine learning. And I wish I had time to tell you about all sorts of different methods in automated machine learning. There's a lot of really interesting ideas, a lot of fantastic packages, and a lot of great work in this sort of area that's expanding pretty rapidly. But I think the most impressive thing about it is you can see that all of these packages have very short code, right? You say, sometimes you say, here's my, here's my automated machine learning method. Here's my training and testing data. I'm willing to run 20 models, or maybe I'll say the time limit is 60. And based on that, please find me the best model. Go. Okay, so how does this kind of thing work? I'm going to tell you really briefly about an approach to automated machine learning that I've been working on in my lab, led by my student Chengren. Okay, so let's imagine that we have M different data sets, okay? So this is like the 215 data sets I showed you from OpenML. And we've got N different machine learning models. Maybe we took every pipeline we could dream of by gridding out the hyperparameters. We made a bunch of different machine learning models, okay? Let's measure the error of every model in every data set. Now, that could take a very long time, okay? But think of this as like a train time. It's like meta train time, okay? And what I'm gonna be trying to do fast is to predict what happens on a new data set, to find the best model on a new data set, okay? So with this training set of AutoML data, okay, I'm gonna form this data table A, which is gonna have one row for every data set, one column for every model, okay? And the entry is gonna be the error, maybe cross-validated error, produced by running that model on that data set. Okay, great. My next step is matrix factorization. Why? Because matrix factorization is very powerful. I would be very happy to tell you more about that, but not in this 9-minute talk. Okay, but we're gonna do just PCA. Okay, and PCA is gonna give us a low-dimensional vector corresponding to every row. Okay, that's like an embedding for the data set. And a low dimensional vector for every column, that's like an embedding for the machine learning model, okay? So that the inner product between the data set embedding and the model embedding gives you approximately the error of that model on that data set. Okay, this is pretty cool because imagine a new data set comes along. We want to find the best machine learning model on that data set, okay? To figure out what all these numbers are, all we would need to know is the latent vector corresponding to that data set. Now that's a lower dimensional object, okay? So now we just have two numbers we need to estimate. How do we estimate those numbers? Let's run a couple of models, let's say 3 on this data set. We're gonna use the least squares to estimate this latent vector for the data set, boom. We can multiply the data set latent vector by the embeddings for all of the models in order to predict the performance of every model on my new data set. Notice that's a lot faster than running every model on my new data set, especially for large data sets. Great, I've got a guess now, these dots, of how every model will perform on my data set, and I can choose the one that I think will be the best. Okay, add a couple of bells and whistles to this, and you have an automated machine learning method. I can show you how well it works. Our method is OBO. There's another variant that is oblivious to how long each model takes to run, which I'm calling random here. And I'm comparing it to another automated machine learning method called AutoScikit-learn. And you can see that we get down to, really reasonable balanced error rates at runtimes that are extraordinarily small, 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, right? As you run it longer and longer, you get better. But even in very short times, you can get very good results, okay? These are on small data sets. On larger data sets, the initial models would take a little bit longer to run, but then you're saving even more time by using an automated machine learning framework that's time sensitive, like OBO is. Great, so what have we learned in the last 9 minutes? I wanna tell you that automated machine learning is a collection of techniques. It's an area of study for how do you automatically pick a good machine learning pipeline for your problem. There are lots of really easy to use packages, and they all make use of really beautiful and powerful ideas that come from all over optimization, machine learning, control, statistics, and beyond. I'd love to tell you more about that. If you have any questions, you can reach me by contacting the ICME staff, sending your questions, and they'll get through to me. Thanks very much, and looking forward to meeting you in person soon.
My thanks to Madeline. So this was obviously a great preview, and as soon as she will join, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to interact with her. But as she said, let us know if you have questions. Next speaker is Professor Mayalu from the Mechanical Engineering Department in ICME. She has joined Stanford very, very recently, so she's another new comer on campus. She received her degrees from MIT. And her interests are broad in the area of biomedical science, and in particular using optimization tools to study, to improve therapeutic effects of in biomedical systems.
Thank you. As Gianluca said, I'm an assistant professor in mechanical engineering. I just started here 2 months ago, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my research vision for my lab, which is at the intersection of computational biology, control theory, and healthcare. So my lab kind of wants to treat the human body as a collection of control system modules. And this, we can think about control system modules at multiple levels within the human body, from locomotion to vision to proprioception to mechanisms within the heart, all the way down to biomolecular mechanisms, which single cells use for controlling their function. So these are kind of the natural control systems that occur within the human body. We can also think about external control inputs as a way to manipulate the dynamics of these natural control systems. So some examples I'm giving here are some diet and medical inputs. And we can also think about some smart engineered cells to be used as control inputs that potentially can manipulate the human body adaptively and kind of use it for a smart therapeutic device in treatment of health and disease. The definition of a dynamic system is a system whose behavior changes over time. So obviously some very obvious examples are cars and airplanes, but we can extend those examples to the human body and even cells and microbes. And control theory is a way for us to regulate the dynamic behavior of these systems and try to understand but also control the response by constraining the system using gains and actually analyzing stability and controllability of the dynamical system. So in biology, there are naturally occurring control systems we can think of that use feedback mechanisms. So one example is calcium homeostasis. So this is where the body uses multiple organs to control the set point of calcium within the blood. And we can also think about another example at a more smaller scale, which of bacteria called bacterial chemotaxis, and this is where the rate of tumbling of a bacteria can be actually controlled using the biomolecular mechanisms and the signaling mechanisms within the bacterial system. And then on the synthetic biology side, this is basically engineered approaches to build these genetic and biomolecular controllers. So one example here is called the toggle switch, and this is where we can design a gene to toggle on or off depending on the chemical concentration that is presented to that system. And then at a larger scale, we can think about system of communicating cells. And how they use communication and feedback to control their population at a set level. So control theory then is useful for developing molecular, cellular, and systems level modeling, but also we can generate hypotheses and direct conceptual understanding. And most importantly, we can extract fundamental principles that are governing these biological control systems. So I'm showing here some bioelectromechanical devices that we have been used in the past for healthcare purposes. So I'm showing here a robotic arm or prosthesis, a glucometer, and a pacemaker. So these systems all work with, or are very controlled and worked with the natural dynamics and control of the human body. So they keep that in mind when they design these systems. And also they have a lot of mechanisms of integrated control that allows for the safety of these devices to be applied and work with the human body. So now when we're thinking about trying to design controllers and devices that are made up potentially of biological materials, we want to make sure that we have similar ideologies. We want to make sure that we're designing these integrated controllers that are made up of biological materials but still are safe, reliable, and controllable, and stable. And we also want to look at the system at an interorgan level, model interorgan level interactions. And this is also because we know certain therapies usually involve multiple organs in health and disease. So the methodology of study here is kind of obviously multiple. So first we want to kind of reason about the behavior of the system, get a mathematical description of the system. from the physics and the biology involved. And then we want to potentially use reduced order modeling where possible to make the system easier to analyze. We can use control theory for the design of the specific system to potentially have specific constraints or characteristics. And computation and simulation go along with that in order to help with the design. And then finally, we do want to incorporate experiments. And this is also for validation, but also, again, for system identification of our models. And so you can imagine that trying to, do this research will require a lot of different disciplines. So, this ranges from bioengineering, control theory, computation, dynamical analysis, just to name a few. And we really need to synthesize the ideas from bioengineering, healthcare, and control engineering to really try, make an effort or an attempt to understand and control these type of systems. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how, on a high level, we can actually design these controllers within what I call microrobotic systems at the single-cell bacterial level. So we can kind of make it analogous to potentially an electrical system where we start off with some parts or fragments. So in this case, they're DNA fragments. And then we can combine these into devices. This is just via reactions. So we can make a gene from those parts, and then we can take those genes, we can make multiple of them, and we can have them interacting together within what we call pathways, and then we introduce them into a host organism. Here it's bacteria. And then after those are introduced, we can basically have those cells read our input circuitry or program circuitry, and they can perform new decision-making behaviors. And finally, we can think about communication between these systems, so these single-cell systems, so they can communicate with each other and perform more sophisticated emergent behaviors. So the specific idea that I would like to start off with in the context of these microrobotic systems is having a bacterial system that is capable of detection and treatment of infection. So some of the functional requirements for something like this would be multi-input detection. So we want to be able to potentially have the doctor administer a signal and potentially attenuate the response, maybe kill the cells so they don't influence the human body in a negative way. But we also want them to respond to different signals of infection and then treat that infection. And so we can think about, again, multi-input detection. We can also think about potentially robust and stable population control. Like I said, again, a main problem is having these cells kind of overgrow and take over. So we don't want that to happen. So one idea is to have this idea of robust population control, which basically is a cell-cell communication signaling approach where the population secretes a signal, and that signal is fed back, so the population can, again, detect that signal. And depending on the concentration that it perceives, basically the regime of signal it detects, it can either respond by increasing in cell density, population density, or decreasing in cell population density. So in control theoretic terms, this is a system that provides both positive and negative feedback in different feedback signaling regimes. And it turns out if we do some analysis on this type of control system dynamics, we can get bistable characteristics for the system. And this is actually an important mechanism for the system to be robust to certain disturbances. And in this case, the disturbances we're trying to reject are mutations that cause the cells to overgrow. And then we have actually implemented this during my postdoc. So this is some work done at Caltech with some biologists, and we've shown that it's capable to have this controller function within mammalian cells. So we're wanting to basically use these ideas for our bacterial robotic system. Lastly, I want to talk about some ideas about looking at inter-organ signaling between different organs. So there has been some research in the correlation of the gut, brain, and skin. So it turns out that different diseases are triggered and can be presented together, specifically that have to do with the gut, brain, and skin. So we can, for instance, talk about the idea of irritable bowel syndrome, which can trigger or be presented with depression, which also could be presented with psoriasis. So these are kind of diseases that often show up together. And it suggests there might be some axis of communication between the mechanisms and systems that make up these diseases. So our idea here is try to basically understand the pathways and the feedback mechanisms that are important for the gut, brain, and skin axis, is what it's been termed. And ideally, what we'd like to do is we'd like to incorporate mechanistic and data-driven mathematical representations of multiple subsystems, which represent either organs or different systems within the body, and then use control theoretic tools for exploration, specifically optimal intervention strategies for diet therapy. So, given a certain diet, how does that influence these diseases or just this axis in health and disease? And some ideas for design and control could be stochastic analysis, optimal control, and robust control when trying to kind of understand and design this kind of multi-model but disciplined framework with mechanistic, data-driven, and potentially uncertain dynamics incorporated within. Yeah, that's it. That's the end of my talk, and I just wanted to mention that I am looking for students. So if you're interested in this research, please reach out to me.
Thank you very much. We have time for a question. Maybe I'll start with one. I was curious about the level of modeling that is currently possible for some of the system versus the ability to actually collect data, so building a data-driven model. So at least in this application, what do you think is the balance? Where do you think we are ahead at this point?
Yeah, so I think for synthetic biology specifically, so the first idea I talked about, we're pretty ahead in trying to get data. So there's a lot of different measurement techniques, whether it be microscopy, whether it be other techniques that look at the density of the cells or the fluorescence of the cells. So there's a lot of ways for us to understand and get some type of reporter for the variables within the system. And within that synthetic biological system, another thing to remember is that we're designing it from ground up. So we're starting with the fragments, so we know basically, ideally we know how they work, and then we're building it with that knowledge to input into the system, into the host cell, which obviously has its own dynamics, which can be modeled potentially as uncertainty or something like that. And then in terms of the second idea, where we're looking at inter-organ modeling, that's a little bit more difficult, especially where data is sparse. And even maybe mechanisms are sparse. So I think the idea is to start with potentially dominant characteristics that we're able to see or achieve, and also the available data. And so that's why I'm thinking of a more kind of hybrid approach, where I'm looking at both mechanism, data-driven approaches, and trying to model uncertainty all in one framework.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, very good. Well, I want to thank again the speakers for this session. There's very, very diverse and very interesting topics.